First question. Which of the following is necessarily true of the profit maximizing equilibrium of a monopolist who sets a single price? Answer A is wrong. The price of the marginal revenue equals marginal cost quantity will be along the market demand curve. The price does not necessarily have to be price equal ATC, average total cost. The quantity could have a price equal to average total cost in the long run, but that is one specific instance. The question is looking for a relationship that always happens. B, price is greater than marginal cost. This is correct. The profit maximizing monopolist will choose a quantity where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. The quantity will be smaller than the allocatively efficient quantity, meaning where supply equals demand. Also, the price will be along the demand curve. The profit maximizing price will be above the marginal cost. C, average total cost is at its minimum level. This is wrong. This is the productively efficient quantity where price equals the minimum ATC, which is not the profit maximizing price level. The profit maximizing monopolist chooses this quantity where price equals the minimum ATC to maximize price discrimination returns. D, marginal revenue is greater than marginal cost. Wrong. The profit maximizing monopolist will choose a quantity where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. E, marginal cost is minimized. This is wrong. The profit maximizing monopolist will choose a quantity where marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost. Number 2, if a perfectly competitive industry were monopolized without any changes in cost conditions, the price and quantity produced would change in which of the following ways? Would price increase, quantity increase, price increase, quantity decrease, and so on? So a quick note, the monopolist is a single firm that can control the quantity produced in the market. The monopolist has the option to choose a quantity where profits are the largest. The monopolist is a price maker. A firm in a perfect competition market cannot control the quantity of products produced in the market. The perfectly competitive market, by definition, has many firms, which creates a market that does not allow one firm to choose the market quantity. In this question, a market with many producers, the perfect competition market, changes until only one firm remains. So answer B is correct. The many firms in a perfectly competitive market will produce more and more products. No one firm can control the market. However, if firms were to leave the perfectly competitive market, then one firm will be able to control the quantities. The one firm would decrease quantities to maximize profit, and the decrease in quantity would increase the price along the demand curve. That's the law of demand. The price is going up, the quantity is going down. In this situation, is here. C is correct. Sorry, B is correct. 3, a monopoly is different from a perfectly competitive firm in that a monopoly, A, does not have a U-shaped average total cost curve. This is wrong because both perfectly competitive monopoly markets can have a U-shaped ATC curve. B, has an average fixed cost curve that is perfectly horizontal. This is wrong. The average fixed cost curve can have the same shape for both markets. C, has a marginal revenue curve that lies below as the demand curve. Now this is correct. In a perfectly competitive market, the demand curve is equal to marginal revenue for a single firm. The demand curve is horizontal. In the perfectly competitive market, demand equals marginal revenue. In the monopoly, the marginal revenue curve does not equal demand. The marginal revenue is downward sloping and has a different slope than the demand curve. The marginal revenue in the monopoly always lies below the demand curve. D, always earns economic profit. This is wrong. Neither market can always earn economic profit. E, operates in an inelastic segment of its demand curve. This is wrong because the monopolist has the choice of quantity he or she makes. The quantity made could be in the elastic, inelastic, or unielastic region of the demand curve. A single price monopolist's marginal revenue is not equal to its price. This is wrong. In a perfectly competitive market, a single firm's price is equal to demand equals the marginal revenue. In a monopoly, the price does not equal marginal revenue. Look at B. Uh, the revenue is less than its price. This is correct. In a monopoly, the firm's marginal revenue is always below its demand curve. Look at the diagram here. You can see the demand curve is downward sloping, and the marginal revenue is inside of that. Okay, so C is greater than its price. That's wrong. The marginal revenue would have to be above the demand curve, which is not if you look at the diagram, part B. D, negative when it maximizes revenues. This is wrong. The monopoly maximizes revenue when marginal revenue is equal to zero by definition. E, zero when it maximizes profit. This is wrong. The monopoly maximizes revenue when marginal revenue equals zero by definition. So D and E are wrong for the same reason. 5. Which of the following is the source of monopoly power? A, scarcity. That's wrong. All markets experience scarcity. B, elasticity of demand. That's wrong. All markets have a demand curve that has different elasticities. C, barriers to entry. Now this is correct. So there are three main causes of barriers to entry that make a market a monopoly. A monopoly is a monopoly primarily because maybe they have a key resource owned by a single firm. I'm the only firm that has the four factors of production to make the product. So that's one reason why they could be a monopoly. A second reason could be that the government gives a single firm the right to produce a good or service. So there's a law or a patent that says I'm the only one that could produce this good or service. That's what makes me a monopoly. Or three, the cost of production make a single producer more efficient than a large number of producers. So these are the barriers of entry. What makes a monopoly? What is the source of monopoly power? And that's the barriers to entry. C is correct. The other answers are wrong. Okay, so which of the following is true for a monopoly but not a perfectly competitive firm? A, the firm maximizes profit by equaling marginal costs to marginal revenue. This is wrong because both firms will maximize profit by placing marginal costs equal to marginal revenue. The firm's demand curve is the same as its average revenue curve. No, this is true for both monopolies and competitive firms. Demand equals marginal revenue equals average revenue. This is for both firms, the monopoly and the perfect competition. Just do a little math to prove it. C, at the profit maximizing output level, price is less than marginal revenue. This is wrong because if you look, it's what is true for the monopoly, but not true for the perfectly firm. You can see that price is equal to the marginal revenue in the perfectly competitive firm. Yeah, so that's the reason why C is wrong. So D, the firm faces a downward sloping demand curve. Now this is correct. You see, we're looking for what's true for monopoly but not for a perfectly competitive firm. So in a perfectly competitive market, the demand curve is horizontal, which is why the firm is a price taker. In the monopoly, the demand curve is downward sloping. So you can see the two markets right here, a monopoly and the perfectly competitive firm. In the diagram on the left, the monopoly's demand curve is downward sloping, and because the perfectly competitive is getting its price from the market itself, its demand curve is horizontal. So in this question, D is correct. The firm faces a downward sloping demand curve in the monopoly, but not in the perfectly competitive firm. E is wrong. The firm earns a zero economic profit in the long run. In the diagram above, price is equal to ATC there. And you can see that both firms get a economic profit equal to zero because look at the left one, the monopoly. The total revenue is PM times QM, but the cost of QM is where is equal to ATC. You can see it along the curve there. So if you look at the perfect competition, it's the same thing. PC times QC is the total revenue, but the price of QC in terms of total cost is equal to ATC. So total revenue equals total cost, and the economic profit in the long run, because price is equal to ATC, is equal to zero. So it says in the diagram above, both firms experience zero economic profit in the long run because they choose a quantity where price is equal to ATC. So if the firm produces 10 units of output, its economic profit will be equal to, and B is correct, it's obvious. So if we look at the quantity equals 10, the price along the demand curve is 20. So total revenue equals $20 times 10. If we look at the total cost at the quantity of 10, the total cost is 15. So the total cost is 150, which is $15 times 10. So the total revenue is equal to $200 minus the total cost, which is 150. The correct answer is $50. Which of the following is most likely to occur if the firm increases production beyond 10 units? A is wrong. Consumers would be willing to purchase more than 10 units at the price of $20 per unit. This is wrong because according to the demand curve, the consumers are willing to pay less than $20 if quantity is greater than 10. B, wrong. The firm would still earn a positive economic profit, but a smaller economic profit because the new quantity greater than 10 would not be at the marginal revenue equals marginal cost criteria for profit maximization. C, the firm would have to lower its price to sell more than 10 units. This is correct. Consumers would be willing to purchase more than 10 units at the price less than $20 per unit. Yeah, so consumers will be willing to purchase more than 10 units at the price of less than $20 per unit. Now, this is according to the demand curve there. D, the firm's average cost of production would initially increase. Wrong. The average total cost would not change. E, the firm's profit would increase. This is wrong. The firm would still earn a positive economic profit, but a smaller economic profit because the new quantity greater than 10 would not be at the marginal revenue equals marginal cost criteria for profit maximization. A monopolist introduces a technological innovation that lowers the marginal cost and average cost of production. The price of the good and the level of output are most likely to change in which of the following ways? So D is correct. The decrease in marginal cost would allow the profit maximizing firm to choose a new quantity where marginal cost C equals marginal revenue. Notice that the price level decreases and the quantity is now QC, which is more than the previous quantity QM. And I'm looking at the diagram right here below. So there is a new marginal cost equal marginal revenue with a new quantity Q, lowercase c, and a smaller price. So that's the answer. It's D. Number 10. One difference between a firm in a perfectly competitive market and an unregulated monopoly is that A is correct. Perfectly competitive firm can increase the quantity it sells at the market price, whereas a monopoly must lower its price to sell more. The diagrams below represent the choices of a single firm from each market. In the monopoly, let's say starting at Q equals 0, the price decreases as more and more quantity are produced. The monopolist's demand curve is downward sloping. In contrast, the demand curve for the firm in the perfect competition model is horizontal. In the perfect competition model, if we start at Q equals 0, the perfectly competitive firm can increase quantity without the price changing. However, both firms in each market will continue to produce until they achieve a quantity where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. B. Perfectly competitive firm sells differentiated products, whereas the monopoly sells a homogeneous product. This is wrong. The perfectly competitive firm sells the same product. C. Price elasticity of demand for a monopoly is much higher than that for a perfectly competitive firm. Wrong. The unregulated profit maximizing monopolists will choose to produce along the elastic region of the demand curve. However, the perfectly competitive firm's demand curve is perfectly elastic. The perfectly competitive firm's price elasticity of demand is much higher. D. Monopolists seek to maximize profit, whereas the perfectly competitive firm maximizes revenues. This is wrong. Both monopolists and perfectly competitive firms are seeking to maximize profit. The main difference is that the perfectly competitive firm has a price set by a market. The monopolist is the market. E. Monopolists can never change a price, whereas the perfect competitor can. Wrong. The monopolist can choose to produce a different quantity which will change the price level. Essentially, consumers will establish a demand curve with different price levels. Each quantity along the demand curve will have a different price. The monopolist looks at the demand curve and chooses a quantity to produce. The price level will be determined when the quantity is actually produced. The monopolist can change the quantity produced, so the monopolist can change the price. For which of the following, excuse me, for the firm shown in the graph above, which combination of output and price will maximize its profit? Well, just looking at this diagram here, Q1 is the profit maximizing output, and the price would be P4. The correct answer is A. Well, this is because the profit maximizing quantity will be where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. If Steve Incorporated is a monopolistic producer of diamonds, the firm's demand curve is downward sloping because A. The number of diamonds Steve R. Incorporated offers for sale affects the price of diamonds. This is correct. The consumers establish a willingness to pay for each quantity. The demand curve is a mapping of consumers' willingness to pay. In this situation, the number of diamonds offered affects the price of diamonds. The more diamonds the firm produces, the lower the price the consumers are willing to pay. The less diamonds the firm produces, the price increases as the consumers are willing to pay more for fewer quantities of diamonds. B. Margin revenue is negative throughout the range of the demand curve. Wrong. The demand curve is first elastic. This is where marginal revenue is greater than zero. Then unit elastic. This is where marginal revenue is equal to zero. And then inelastic. This is where marginal revenue is smaller than zero along the downward sloping demand curve. C. Marginal revenue is positive throughout the range of the demand curve. This is wrong. The demand curve is first elastic. Marginal revenue is greater than zero. Then unit elastic. This is where marginal revenue is equal to zero. And then inelastic, where marginal revenue is smaller than zero along the downward sloping demand curve. D. The diamond industry consists of a few firms selling similar diamonds. Wrong. The firm is a monopolist. E. The demand for diamonds is inelastic. This is wrong. The demand curve is first elastic, then unit elastic, and then inelastic along the downward sloping demand curve. The quantity chosen along the demand curve determines the elasticity. No information in this question is provided about the quantity chosen along the elastic regions. 13. Compared to a perfectly competitive industry with the same demand and cost curves, a monopoly's price and output will be which of the following? C is correct. There are many firms in a perfectly competitive market, which means that no one firm can control quantities produced in the market. The perfectly competitive market will have more quantities produced and lower prices. The monopolist is the only firm in the market. The monopolistic firm will choose lower quantities, which will increase the price. Number 14. For the firm shown in the graph above or below, the short-run profit maximizing strategy will be to set output. B is correct. They're going to set the output at Q1, which has a price of P3. The firm will choose Q1 because the quantity is where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. The price, P3, is above the ATC curve. This means that the total revenue is greater than total cost. The firm will experience economic. So again, the firm will choose Q1 because the quantity is where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. The price P3 is above the ATC curve. This means that the total revenue is greater than total cost. The firm will experience economic profit. The other answers are incorrect. Number 15. Assuming a linear downward sloping demand curve, as a monopoly firm sells additional units of output, its marginal revenue will, the correct answer is D, decrease continuously. In the elastic region of the demand curve, marginal revenue is greater than zero. Then in the unit elastic region, marginal revenue is equal to zero. And in the inelastic region, the marginal revenue is smaller than zero. The marginal revenue is decreasing along the downward sloping demand curve. If the monopolist is unregulated, its profit maximizing price and output level would lead to a deadweight loss equal to the area B, RTV. So you see three diagrams here. The first diagram is the original question. Diagram 1 is, I've segregated the original diagram, and diagram 2 is another variant. But these are all three pictures of the same diagram. I just color-coded two of them to show differences in deadweight loss. So B, RTV is correct. In diagram 2, the area below the demand curve and above the market price is the consumer surplus. The area above the supply curve and below market price is the producer surplus. You can see these two areas here highlighted by green and blue in diagram 2. However, in diagram 1, consumer surplus and producer surplus declines by the area between Q1 and Q3 because the monopolist will only produce Q1 and no other quantity. RTV is the total surplus loss by not producing more than Q1. The area RTV is known as deadweight loss. In the diagram above, the deadweight loss from a profit maximizing monopolist is represented by the area, and this question is I, J, and K. That's the area. So the profit maximizing monopolist will not produce units beyond Q. Here, the monopolist would choose quantity Q, where marginal revenue equals marginal cost, and the price will be G. However, this will not, the total surplus will decline by IJK because nothing beyond Q is produced. Area IJK is the deadweight loss. It's the total surplus loss by not producing at beyond Q. Compared with the perfectly competitive market, a single price monopoly with the same market demand and cost curves will, and this answer is D, decrease output and increase price. This is correct because the profit maximizing monopoly will choose the quantity where marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost to maximize profit. The quantity will be lower and the price will be higher.